Hello, my name is Chen Czarnecki. Some people might know me as Scott, that's my legal name. I wanted to put this together, make a video as an introduction and an accompaniment to an interview that was conducted here in my house a few weeks ago by a television program here in Australia called A Current Affair. And they're an investigative journalism crew that had recently aired an episode that featured the 12 tribes. And the main protagonists in that episode were a fellow named Matthew Klein and a lady named Rosemary Crusado. And these are both friends of mine. I've known them for a long time, and I know their stories, and I know that they're true. And but in the course of that interview with them, they did a little cameo shot of the people who first came down here to Australia to introduce this religious scourge to the country, and they had a little photograph of me in my little round glasses, and noon. They forgot somebody else, but and I thought that was pretty interesting to be on national TV. They had my name with my surname, and it was misspelled, but that was pretty close, and my AKA. And I didn't think too much about it really, but then my lady and I got to talking about it, and we wondered if it was maybe an opportunity to have a conversation, to open up a conversation, because I've been wanting to, I guess, publish my thoughts for a long time now. I've been gone 10 years. I was in the community from 1979 to 2009, roughly. Our leaving wasn't on one day, it was a process, but yeah, about 30 years, and it's difficult for me to sort of go, well, I just checked out for 30 years, I had a brainwashing episode, and now I'm back to normal again. It doesn't really work that way for me. I was trying to work things out ever since I can remember, and certainly by the time I was 23, I was fairly desperate to even become a Christian. I remember putting my head in my hands and just thinking, man, I'm a Christian, and I was about 3 weeks into it. But I was always looking for answers, and of course God is outside, so you look outside yourself for an answer. And so I still am, I did that for 30 years in the community, and I'm still doing it. I'm still trying to work out what's going on, and I don't think, I mean, my life in the 12 tribes was consistent with who I am. And so, so I've been wanting to say something. I've kind of finding my voice. I found a certain kind of voice in the community, and I could speak up and feel like it was valuable. But it was in such a narrow framework. It was only valuable to my friends, the people in the community. It wasn't valuable to anybody else. And so you can lock into the story and the role and do well, but actually, I think in many ways it really helped me, but and then in many ways it was equally disempowering, and sort of what you give up you get is my conclusion in the end, a bit of a spiritual equation. And so, but it's still a story, it's not ultimately you have to wake up and realize that you're playing a role, and it's really all your responsibility anyway, and God isn't outside. So anyway, I've been wanting to talk about these things, and then I see, like Kevin was talking about writing a book, and Kate just did an interview, and I've been following the private groups on Facebook that consist of ex-12 tribes members, and since they started, and with great interest really in getting a perspective, and kind of thinking, well, finally we've got a platform we can debrief and deconstruct, and what the heck were we doing, but I didn't see it being that way so much, becoming that, and I also didn't feel capable of taking in that direction, primarily because I can't type, and text is just like, it's way too slow for my thought life. And so Yeah, I'm working on that. Got some transcription software and a Bluetooth headphone, and I'm hoping I can be able to record things. I just think that we all have a lot to say, you know, and I'm sensing it, and I just would go to the links to involve myself with an investigative journalism TV program in order to speak. And this is not really the platform I would have chosen. You know, I have a long-standing distrust of investigative journalists of any sort, really. And but you know, they're trying to do a good thing and they're trying to make a living. And so it was a platform that was presented. And so I decided to take him up on it. I sent him an email, asking to say I'm the guy in the picture, and would you like a conversation? And they were on the phone in less than an hour, and we had an interview about a week later. And it was, you know, a blend of a roaring success and complete disaster. There's so many things I could have said better, or things I didn't even touch, didn't even talk about. But some things got out, you know, and of course it was very leading too. She's a journalist who's conducting interviews, and she's got a list of questions, and her best questions are the most tantalizing, scintillating sort of stuff, really. And I talked to him about that. I said I was hoping this wouldn't just become a bunch of scintillating references, but you know, and there's no editorial mechanism allowed for. All what they told me was, if you say it, then it's available, and they can chop and change it and soundbite it to death, you know. And I don't have control over that, and there's no recourse. But that's okay. I knew that. I kind of had my eyes open when I went into it. I think, although I did have learned a lot. I wouldn't do it quite the same. I let her hold space too much. This is my house. I should have held the space and sat where I wanted to sit, and they could work around me, and I would have been probably freer. But that's okay. Maybe next time. But anyway, they did this interview with me, and yeah, it was generally okay. And at least it's the beginning, you know. It's a platform, because my friend Sean, who's ex-12 Tribes, he and his wife Misty, they live not an hour away or so, and we get together a lot, and we talk about these things a lot, and these kind of things about what it means to be a religious fanatic, and does God exist, and what is consciousness, and you know, who am I? That's the best question I can come up with. Who am I? Who are we? And what is identity? And the ego, exploring the ego, and listening to people like Alan Watts and Terence McKenna and Sadhguru and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and these kind of people, you know, and many more. You know, people are just opening the mind and opening the envelope, stretch it out, and let some new ideas come into the neighborhood. You know, and in contrast to the narrow-mindedness that I so devotedly gave myself to for 30 years, it's an enthralling experience to be extremely open-minded. And like Terence McKenna said one day, he said, entertain any idea. In other words, let it in, you know, set it down, what do you got? And but then he said, believe none of them. Entertain any idea and believe none of them. And that one has stood with me since I heard that. That made a huge amount of sense to me. And because I'm really tired of finding my identity in an idea, and I think that it's really troublesome, and it causes a huge amount of problems on the planet and among the species, that we find our identity in our thoughts, and especially solidified thoughts like belief systems and convictions and all that stuff, you know, that we say, this is who I am, and I'm an idea, or I'm a Republican, or I'm a liberal, or I'm left-wing, right-wing, I'm a Christian, I'm an atheist. These are all ideas, and so they're fine to have, and you know, let's play with them. But I reckon the more lights you got going on your in your neural net, the more ideas, more neighborhoods lit up, and the more open everything is, the more you're going to see. You're going to see things from different perspectives, and you're going to understand, because it's like when you go down a road and you travel this road many times, and you know it going one direction, you know it coming back, and then one day it dawns on you, oh, this is that place in the road where I'm actually passing that spot, and it looks different from the other way, and it's a beautiful moment. And life is a bit like that, you know. And if you only ever see things from your own perspective, you have a really narrow reality view. But if you can open yourself up, and you're just doing yourself a favor and everybody else too. So, but I wouldn't know that if I hadn't been so hyper narrow-minded. And so I value my experience being like that. And it was deliberate. I made the choice. I was never, in my perception, a victim of any sort of brainwashing method. I brainwashed myself, possibly. But you know, locking into a story, a narrative, and then living it out. If you want to call it brainwashing, you can, and you're going to get the benefit of the negative connotations that go with that word. But it's an irresponsible position to take, in my opinion. I don't know. I chose to live the life I lived, and I need to stand by that, I reckon. And this is my opinion, you know. All this is just my opinion. I'm not telling you nothing. Please don't believe me about anything. Yeah, I just like the freedom to be wrong, you know. I'm done with being right about everything all the time. I'm over that. This is all ego, obviously, you know. We're talking about the human ego here, and all the stuff that results from our misidentity as an ego, and our amnesia as to who we really are. And this is, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to wake up, you know. Not that I'm awake, but I'm starting to stir, I think. And anyway, I got some notes in front of me here. I want to act like I'm reading here for a minute. So I was following these conversations on the Facebook sites and the private groups, and there's a lot of negativity, a lot of bitterness, and a lot of bad taste in the mouth. And so, and I get that. It was really kind of eye-opening to me to see it from a younger perspective, the youth mostly. Not everybody. It's a lot of people who've made a decision as an adult had some pretty nasty things to say, and fair enough, you know. Fair enough. It's all true. But what I kind of really noticed, what stood out to me, was the lack of anything good that might have been happening there, or I don't know, even beautiful. And although there was a few things that people would drop in about good experiences, but my memory of my life in the community consists mostly of magical stuff and deep, deep friends that I'll never touch that sort of friendship again, I don't think. We were so tight and so woven together and so in it. And this is what an in-group, out-group situation will get for you, you know, that kind of camaraderie. You would get it in the military, especially under fire. You could get it in I mean, kind of any institutionalization, but as long, especially if you have an in-group, out-group thing that you've created, right and wrong, and you so need the other people to be wrong in order to know who you are. You need that. You need them all to be wrong, and so you can be so incredibly right. And you need the unholy to be holy, and you need the unclean so you can be clean. And these are, you know. Yeah, this is just narrow-mindedness. This is how it works. We exclude what we don't want to believe or understand or see or even look at, and we embrace what we say is true because we said it's true. I mean, it's confirmation bias writ large, you know, and I think we can get over this kind of stuff. So anyway, I was watching these the comments that were going by on Facebook, and And I'd get involved a little bit here and again, add something. And somebody one day they said, boy, it'd be nice if one of the parents or the older people would write, why did you even join? You know, why did you join? Why did you create such a thing and raise us here in it and bring us up in this thing? You know, that we anyway. So I thought that was good, you know, but I again, I can't. My mind is working too fast to type an answer to that kind of question. And so here I am, you know, because I worked out that talking is my my medium. And so so here we go. So I would like to help provide that only from my perspective, my understanding, my experience of why I did what I did, and I wanted to make it in this included in this introduction to this interview that the Current Affair did. It just seemed a good way. So I'm going to put this introduction together with the interview and upload it to this site and here you go. And you can have a watch, and for anybody, I'd love to start saying hello to people, but I'm not going to because the list is too long. Yeah, I just, you know, I don't know if I got to what I was talking about with Sean, but Sean, he lives not too far away, and we get to talking about this kind of stuff a lot. And we're going to produce a podcast. Sean and my lady Julie and I are working toward a podcast, getting some equipment together, and it's a pretty simple thing, really, if you want it to be. And we have so many nice discussions, and we often think, man, it'd be nice to include other people and see what other people even have to say. And I don't know, I just want to stimulate a conversation toward toward consciousness and openness and life, you know. I learned in the Bible that I could lose my life, and it's a valuable, precious possession, and if I'm not careful, I'm going to lose it, and I'm going to trade it in for a thing called death, and death is really, oh boy, I mean, it's bad news according to what people say. I don't know, I never met anybody went there and came back, but apparently people did. And so life is this really precious thing, and you can lose it. And so I don't think so anymore. I don't think that's true. I think that I am life, and we're all life. We're an expression and eruption of life, and that happens for a while, you know, this form, and then we go back into being and like a wave into the ocean, and life remains, but I don't remain, and that's okay with me, you know. I don't have a problem with that, because life remains, and I can't lose my life. That's my underpinning, it's my foundation, it's my ground. You can't get me off that, and you can't separate me from life, because I am life. And so this is my thoughts on that matter, and it fundamentally undoes the whole monotheistic dogma that death is something to be really, really seriously afraid of. And it reminds me of stories that the old guys might have told to the kids around the campfire 50,000 years ago, you know. And it's superstition and fear-mongering, and you can get people to do what you want them to do through fear. This is common knowledge, but it has its limitations, and it's certainly limiting to the human being, and we need to stop, you know. I think we can get over this, and this is really my main thing. I got a problem with monotheism. I have some problems with the 12 tribes, and you know, I kind of wish they would stop doing that kind of stuff. The whole business really would come to a stop. I'm not down with them. We need to destroy them. But you know, it's in the greater context. I have a problem with monotheism, and particularly fundamentalism in the biblical narrative. And you look at any fundamentalist expression of the Bible, and you got problems. You know, you got problems. You got problems with the Christian conservative right in America, which I obviously am not one of, and you know, trying to make America into an authoritarian theocracy is not a good idea. It's not a good idea, and mixing religion and politics and your legal structures is not a good idea. And they knew that a long time ago, but it's still there, you know, like there's just this desire to tell people what they've got to do, and this is the right way to do, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and law is the rule of law. You know, I hate that phrase, the rule of law. Like, where the heck? The law is an external document that was written by somebody. The Bible is a document that was written by somebody. It started out in the heart and it ended up on paper. You got the direction wrong. We wrote that stuff. We write the stories. We write all this disempowering shit, and we are responsible. And that thing does not tell me what to do, and where is the compass anyway? You know, like when you look for external validation so feverishly, and your compass, your guidance system is outside of yourself, as in the Christian narrative that God is outside of you somewhere. He's so far outside of you that no matter where you look, you can't see him, and if you, even with your greatest telescope, you wouldn't find him, and he's out there somewhere as an entity, not as everything, but as an entity, as a being with existential existence. Okay, now, so that's why I got to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I walked into the Areopagus, and I thought, man, God has an address, because I was looking outside myself, because I was raised in a Christian culture. And I knew I needed to be reconnected. I did acid one day, and I sat down and tried to bond with a tree, and it didn't work. You know, I knew I was separated. I was alienated. But that doesn't mean that God is outside of you. I was just looking in the wrong direction, and so there's a phone. Okay, I sorted that out. I also, enough rambling on, I had a couple of amendments I wanted to make to that interview because I felt it was incomplete in a couple of ways. And primarily, I felt like I missed an opportunity to clarify a few things about child discipline and the severity of it. And I looking back, I know that I was wary of where she was wanting to lead things and not wanting to give her some juicy stuff, really. But also when she mentions, you'll see in the interview, when she's getting into this thing about child discipline, I was in a space of thinking about our younger children, babies, like that Matthew had been suggesting that we beat 6-month-old babies, and I was kind of trying to say, well, no, I don't know anybody that beats 6-month-old babies. But the fact is that as time goes on, a lot of children do get beaten, and so, but I kind of missed the boat, really, and it kind of sounded like I was saying that we, in the 12 tribes, that's an exaggeration that we beat our children, but it's not. And so I just want to publicly, for the record, correct this. When you see the interview, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I also, Allison, the interviewer, was talking about medical neglect, and specifically stillborn children, and specifically Rose's baby who died. And depending on the position you want to take on what could have happened if she had gone to the hospital earlier, yeah, that baby might have lived. And so this obviously a topic, and so she was really trying to pin me down about where children are buried. And so I had a response to that I emailed to her, and I just want to read this out to you, just so we can know what I actually had to say and what I think about things. Allison, I do have a couple of points I would like to clarify. When we were discussing child discipline, I made the comment that to say that the community beats their children would be an exaggeration. At that moment, I was referring to the very young. As they grow older, the spankings can and do become more intense and much harder. The child training teachings are very clear that at no point should a parent discipline their child out of anger or frustration, ever. Needless to say, it does happen anyway. It happens a lot. The impossibly high standard contributes to that. There have been many instances of children being beaten. The youth who have left have many stories to tell. And I also wrote regarding that stillborn issue, I said the second thing that I would like to clarify regards your question about where the stillborn children may have been buried. I later remembered that the Australian community had been working to legally register its own private cemetery. I'm 99% sure that this did happen eventually. That, of course, does not mean that the deaths were reported necessarily, but only that they were buried in a legal location. While Noon will have known on which property a baby was buried, the parents would surely have chosen the particular site. The father, of course, would have carried out the task, as the mother would certainly be recovering in bed. They might be alone in that knowledge, and out of respect for the parents, tragic events like these were not topics of general conversation in the community. So I'm just trying to give her as much reality as I know anyway about those subjects, and yeah, so that's about it. So I hope you enjoy the interview. I enjoyed it. I was a bit spooked on the day, but got a few things across. And hopefully it's just, you know, I just want to have more conversation. I miss the conversation. I miss I mean, you know, community, common, conversation, all that stuff, it goes together. We were welded together, and it was too much. Sometimes I just wanted to shut the door and have some space, but I do miss friends. You know, it's good to have friends. It's good to have someone to talk to. And so if this is, you know, an aid to that, well, then that's what I'd like to do. That's about all. Talk to you soon.
Visual and sound point that they can
Yeah.
go up.
Yeah.
And triangulate on.
Yeah.
So Matt, I'll give you, if you said thumbs up, and it's like 25 minutes, and give it to Al.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
There's an obvious spot, I'll just say, go ahead
Yeah.
and stop there. Right, let me just get this refocused.
I would like to explain that, you know, that
Yeah.
thing about these groups that these people are discussing their life and they're unhappy they left, you know, but there's never, no one offers an explanation of why were you even there? And I don't expect the children to answer that question because it's self-explanatory. They were born there.
Yeah.
And so the stuff they went through is in a different camp, but the stuff I went through, or caused,
Yeah.
is I would be the one that should explain.
Yeah. And I think it would be great if you could explain to our audience why people join. Like I said, it's the one glaring thing that I feel like has been missing from any kind of discussion, any piece of journalism that's been documented about the 12 tribes in Australia is why do people join?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, guys, if you want to get going, I'm all good, and everyone's happy.
All right. Are you?
I'm happy, yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm happy
All right.
to be with
Let's try this. Okay. First things first, Han. We're going to go off on a lot of tangents, but why don't we start for you at the very beginning? How was it that you came to be a part of the 12 tribes over in the United States, all the way back, in the 1970s?
79, yeah, okay. That's, I have to condense a long story into a short version here. I was a kind of a searching person, you know, since I was...
that's good. Just say, Karen Ali, and just when you lean forward, it goes in and out of focus. Ali, maybe just speak up a tiny bit with your questions.
Me?
Just so, because we...
So none of this kind of stuff?
Yeah, no,
Yeah, try and stay
it's not really your fault. It's just,
No, I enjoy that, though.
I know you do, I'm sure you probably do, but just trying to keep it so we know.
I try to restrain myself.
Okay, and carry on.
All right, so take me back to the beginning, Han. 1979. How was it that you came to be in the 12 tribes?
Well, I don't know. I would say, without being too long-winded, that I was kind of a thoughtful kid who tried to work out what the heck was going on. I remember sitting on the school bus when I was 14 wondering why everybody was afraid of everybody, including myself, and why it just seemed like we had left something behind. We'd forgotten something, like childhood had slipped away and I was becoming an adult. And my neighbor, the school teacher, said, "Oh, you're 13 now, you'll never be a child again." And I got mad, like I love the guiltless, innocent sense that children have, and that life is actually fun and something to be enjoyed and not trudged through. And I watched my father at the end of the table with the mortgage sitting on his head, and his head was getting lower and lower, and I thought, I'm not going to do that. And so that's fine to make a resolution. I made another one when I was 9 that I would never stop running, and I didn't keep that one either. But as you become an adult, you get enculturated into being an adult, and life becomes a worry and a trouble and a hardship, and so I don't know, I just needed a meaning, I needed, why am I doing this? It's a simple question. It's not uncommonly asked. Hardly ever do you get an answer, except maybe 42 or something. And so I began kind of looking around, and I looked at Buddhism, and that appealed to me. I thought, oh, this makes a little bit of sense, but I didn't understand. I was just young, and nothing was really making sense. I remember standing in front of a bookshelf in an alternative food store, and they had these books, and it was all Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and all these books about self-actualization, self-realization, new agey sort of stuff. And I remember just getting completely frustrated and walking away thinking, these people, that's fine, you write a book, but I need somebody here to tell me what to do. And so I was reaching a point of desperation, and I would read John Birch Society literature. I'd read everything, left to right, up and down, trying to find something that made sense. And I had a relationship with a girl, and that sort of dissolved in not a nice way, and it was just a point of desperation. I was 23, and so I was painting inside of a house one day, and it came to me, I just need to go. And it was almost like Cat Stevens was in my head, I've got to go away, I got to go. And so I got off the ladder, I finished the day, and got a tent and a backpack and a sleeping bag, and I took my dog, little Doberman, and we went on the road. And just, I told my dad, I got to find God. And God, to me, according to the culture I'd been raised in, was out there somewhere. And so, it's a bit of a story. Working in carnivals and state fairs with a guy and seeing a pretty seedy side of life and not doing any of the things I had intended to do. And a few months later, we arrived in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is the birthplace of the 12 tribes. And I took my dog out for a walk in a big veterans cemetery, Civil War cemetery with endless rows of white crosses. And because I used to like cemeteries, I used to like reading what they said on the stones and thinking about death and life, and morbid sort of guy. And I noticed two people walking on the sidewalk about 50 meters away, and young guys, likely looking, and so I ran over to see if they had a joint they could sell me, and which was one of my favorite occupations at that time. And they said they didn't, and they were from the community, and they said they didn't do that, but they had something better. And they started telling me about their life. And the guy's name was Ira, and Alphonse was there. And the community, it turns out, was about 2 blocks away. And they were out taking a walk that day, talking about things. And Ira told me that where he lived, everybody shared everything in common. And they just wanted to love one another. And they wanted to bring light to the planet. They wanted to bring light. They wanted to be light. So much love that there was a light shining. And he said, and if I was, he asked me what I was doing. At one point I said, well, I'm seeking the truth. I don't know what I said, something like that. And he said, well, if you really are, he said, you need to come visit, because where we live is the light. And if you're If you're really sincere, you're going to be drawn to the light. And if you're not, you'll be repelled. You won't even want to be there. And I've never met anybody, he said it with such calm conviction that I've never met anybody who could speak with that kind of authority and confidence before. Not any religious people, no pastors, nobody. I never read that in a book. Nobody said, come home with me, we live in the light. And you'll be drawn to it if you're real. It was a challenge. And I thought, man, I've got to see this.
So you went along?
I went along, yeah. Not right that instant. The next day, I got this guy I was traveling with, he's an alcoholic carny. I got him to drop me off there, and it was just coming on dusk, and it's just this indistinct sort of a warehouse backyard with a chain link fence, and they had their bakery in there. But it was the back of a building which was a restaurant called the Areopagus in Tennessee, and it was one of their original restaurants. And people were gathering, an old pickup truck showed up, and a bunch of guys jumped off the back, and everybody looks like a hippie. They all got long hair and beards and, jeans and all that kind of gear. And so I felt very at home. And about, I don't know, probably 60 people showed up, and everybody started going in the building, and so I went in with them. And I walked in that door, and it was like I went on to another planet. I've told the story a number of times, and I still remember it quite well. I don't know. It was a different spirit, a different atmosphere, a different place, and I was completely overwhelmed by the sensation. I went in and I sat down, and they're having a teaching. They were gathering for a teaching. So everybody's sitting in chairs, and I'm listening. I didn't understand a word they were talking about. It's all Bible stuff, and the Bible to me was just like some obscure part of our culture. It just didn't make much sense, and it seemed to be popular, but I didn't know why. And so, but what they, I don't know what the teaching was about anymore. I remember who was teaching, but I looked around and I thought to myself, God has a home. He has a home. He lives here. This is it. And I can't explain why that thought came to me. I can't. It wasn't based on. It's like empirical evidence in a way. It was a deep sensation inside myself that God actually has a geographical address, and this is it. And that He had led me to this place. And I just was wide open to this crazy idea for some reason. And it went on from there. It deepened. It got more intense. No one said anything to me at this point. There was people were smiling, they're friendly, they're happy. But this all happened all by myself. And so, people say I was brainwashed, say, for example. This might be suggested. And I get that. I understand the process, I think, a little bit. But in my case, I would say not. I would say I was just ready, and I needed to do that. And I look back at my life, and I don't really have any regrets. I wouldn't probably do anything differently. I needed to do it. Although I did what I needed to do, I think we all do. And so, anyway, your question was
how you came to be, but I think you really kind of explained that. But did you immediately feel that feeling amazing? I feel like this is where God's meant to be. From that moment, are you a part of the 12 tribes?
No, not at all. No, you're a candidate, and you have to prove yourself. You have to express faith. People don't get sucked in and sort of pasted on and sign here. It doesn't work that way at all. There's a strict vetting process that goes on, and in order for someone to be baptized, which is the point where you sever your ties with the world and you become part of the body of Messiah. In order to be baptized, you have to be able to say out of your own mouth that you love Yeshua, Jesus, with all of your heart. And you are a complete sinner, and you need to be forgiven, and you're totally grateful for Him, and all of that stuff. You need to have that understanding. And in addition, that it will now, in exchange for His spotless life on your behalf, that your life is forfeit. And you belong to Him now. And He owns you. And your only purpose for even having a will is to do the will of God. And these are deep things. If you take those things on board in your mind, you become very malleable and very open and very liberated also. because life is polarities, and so to the degree that you have narrowness, you also have focus, and so yeah, I'm not sure what else to tell you about that.
How did it come to be that you would come to Australia to set up the 12 tribes? Can you talk? Was that and look, I guess we can't go through it for hours, but explain to me how it happened that the 12 tribes was going to open up here in Australia and your role in that setup here.
Well, I'd been in the community in Island Pond, Vermont for about 6 years, which is kind of a young disciple still, really. And we had a community of 330 people in a small town in northern Vermont called Island Pond. And we had about 13 households spread out through that town. And a big building in the middle of town, which was 3 stories. We used to gather up there, called the Block. And we'd gather up there and have our celebrations, singing and dancing on Sunday morning. We'd open all the windows, the whole town could hear us. We were quite an intrusion into a very conservative, small Vermont town. And it was an interesting experience. But anyway, our understanding, led by the founder, an originator of the 12 Tribes, a guy by the name of Albert Eugene Spriggs, who is commonly known as Yonaic. And he started to develop an idea that the life that we were living was, in fact, the life that the God of all creation, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, the God of the Bible, wanted and was going to fill the whole earth with our life, with a life of people who are completely and utterly devoted to loving one another at all costs. And it fit what he read in the Bible, and that's his desire was to be an instrument to bring that about, to bring about the will of God on the earth. Like we say in the Lord's Prayer, may your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And many people say that prayer, but I don't know who's taking it seriously. He took it seriously. I have still, and this is going to be offensive to some people, a lot of respect for Yonaic, because, like I told you earlier, he of all the people I've ever met and encountered, and I've had so many conversations with so many religious people, and been one myself, and of all of that, Yonaic is the only person I've ever met who made sense out of that book. Only person. Everybody else, you kind of pick and choose and ignore this and ignore that and focus on something, have an issue, whatever, or just do it as an insurance policy. It's a marvelous insurance policy, but he made sense, you know, and so that, yeah.
And so why Australia?
So the goal was that it says in the Bible that, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached as a witness to all the world, and in the end shall come. That's in Matthew 24:14. And so this was necessary, that the whole world would see this as a witness, not a report, but as something you could see with your eyes. And this meant a visible demonstration of people living together, loving one another, like they did in the first church, which is recorded in Acts 2 and Acts 4. That says clearly that everybody who originally believed all lived together, and they shared everything they had. They shared everything in common. No one considered anything they had to be their own. These are in black and white, these things, these statements about the first church. And so he took that pattern and said, this is obviously how it's supposed to be. You know, why, you know, it changed and adulterated over the years, but why, you know, this can't be a good thing. But part of the plan and that purpose was that it fills the earth, the whole earth. Everybody has to see this. In order for judgment to come righteously on the earth, people need to see a witness. They need to see a demonstration like, hey, this is possible. You can do this. You human beings, you can love one another. And based on that reference point, God, in his mercy, could come and bring judgment and end every wickedness on the planet. End it all. Bring peace on the earth. Now this is the story. And so that meant we needed to go out. And at that time, there was a community in France. There were communities in Vermont and community in Sousse, France, in southern France, down in the Pyrenees Mountains. And there was a young fellow living there at the time who had immigrated from England with his parents when he was 6 years old, came out on a boat. And so he was a permanent resident of Australia, but had never got citizenship. Now, when he was 18, 20, 21, 20, he went back to Europe, to England, to see relatives and had a trip around. And he and a friend were wandering around, and they passed through Sousse, France, on their way to Spain, and ran out of petrol in front of what's called Tabitha's place. It's their chateau in France. And so they ended up inside and had a visit and were very taken. They went on their way, but eventually Mark, my friend, came back and stayed there for a while. And at that point he was convicted, and he believed and joined the community. Now he's an Australian permanent resident, so he's there for a couple of years, coming up to 3 years you lose your permanent residency because you're not a permanent resident. And so it was decided that he needed to come back to Australia. At that point in the 12 tribes, there was no one in the southern hemisphere at all. And we would never send one person by themselves. 2 by 2 is the biblical standard, and that's how Jesus did it. And so we looked around, and not me, but the government, which is a plurality of men, sit around and make decisions on behalf of the community. And so they considered everybody. And then finally somebody eventually said, and people were praying and fasting. It's a big deal, you know. Who are we going to send to the other side of the planet to start up the 12 tribes? You know, like, we take this stuff real seriously. And somebody put my name forward, and everybody found agreement with that. And I was pretty astounded, you know, because I was just a little sort of disciple, and I didn't have these kind of ambitions for myself. But so then we were sent. We were sent. The whole community, 330 people, we all got down on our knees, and everybody laid hands on us in the center and prayed for us and empowered us and stuck us on a plane, and we came down here and to establish the kingdom.
Where did you establish the kingdom, and how do you start building the kingdom? Like how does that happen?
Well, you need people to give up their life. It's kind of like a multi-level marketing scheme. You need people to respond, and then that builds and builds and builds and builds. And so this is the idea. And but we were here 6 months. I had a 6-month visitor's visa, and nobody responded to me and Mark. We weren't really much of an evangelistic team. I've learned a few things about talking to people over the years, but I was quite reticent, and him too. And so, but then that's when we went to New Zealand. We had that fellow in New Zealand that had invited anybody to come visit, so we did. So we ended up in New Zealand at that point. But we eventually came back in.
But you built a bit of a community within New Zealand.
25 people.
Right.
We grew up to 25, yeah.
And you came back to Australia.
Yeah, but the reason we built up a community was because we, the community in Island Pond sent out a couple to help us, and a married couple who had 2 children at the time, and who by the name of Noon and Sekel, Arthur and Judy were their names, and they're dear friends of mine. They're wonderful people. Yeah, and so they came out to help us. And Noon is
Is he still a member?
oh yeah, he's in charge of the community in Picton effectively. Well, he's in charge of all the communities in Australia effectively, I would say. He's a leader. He's a leader. He was there when I got there. He'd been there for a few years already by the time I got there. He's always been an authority. He's a leader. A teacher, a shepherd, a deep person, very artistic, very musical. He's a great guy to be around, pretty intense, and he's a good friend of mine. He's helped me a lot over the years. And so they came out to help us, and because of his energy and his understanding and his maturity, people started to come and join. And so, how did you go
in those early days here in Australia when you started to have a base? How did you grow that base? where were you going? Because obviously we've heard things about going to local festivals, going to that. Can you I guess talk me through?
Well, the first guy that joined you as up and coming elders or whatever on your last segment there on a current affair, a share, and it's ER not IR, and
good to know.
that's okay, and I just wanted to go to a concert one night, and so Mark and I, there was at this point there was Arthur and Judy, and there was me and Mark, and then Judy got pregnant, and then we needed a midwife, and so one was sent out from the community in France, and actually had quite a connection with Mark, and they ended up getting married. And so, but at this point we were 5 people. So we went to this festival, not festival, it was a concert, Phil Keaggy concert. Phil Keaggy is a Christian guitarist, he's a very fine musician. And so we would go to events like this, and we'd have these little papers that we'd print up. And the particular one we took that night was called Left in the Dust, and it was an appeal to Christians who felt left in the dust. It was like all the enthusiasm and praise God and I love God, and where does it go? It just becomes nothing. It's just lost in the world. And so we were standing there as the concert let out, and I turned around and I handed one to a share, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and we made a connection, and he was happy to get it. And then a few days later we heard from him, and he started to come around, and eventually he joined. So he was the first member in Australia, down here, to join. And then other things happened. We just meet people, we were just a disciple of Yahshua in the 12 tribes is someone who is always on the lookout to talk to someone, always ready to hand them a piece of paper and with their address and their phone number on it at least, always ready to invite someone home for a Friday night meal or anytime they want to come. Always. We're a conduit for people to come in through. That was our goal, our purpose. That was one of them, was to do that. And so we'd meet people everywhere. On a job, I met a guy named Campbell, and Campbell eventually became a member of the community, and his best friend Andrew, who is also listed in your little Israel, and they were best friends. And a girl that they had gone to school with named Bahira, she came too, marvelous lady, and she's still down there in Picton.
So, in these early days of the 12 tribes in Australia, are you considered a leader? Are you leading people? Are you advising the other members in the community about the teachings and the way to live their life?
I mean, Noon was in charge, and when Noon's in charge, that Noon's in charge, and that's okay. It's all quite secure, actually. But he was trying to help me. I got in the most trouble for not being forward enough and not spanking people hard enough and not speaking up when I should. That's when I would get in trouble.
Even as a leader.
You need to lead.
Yeah.
And if someone's doing something off, you need to say something. And I'm not a confrontational person by nature, so I had to learn these things a bit. And then you have to, definitely. I was the leader, though. All we had was young people. I had to be the leader. And I was also the crew head. I was the industry. I was the prime mover of our industry, the way we paid bills, and I always was.
Can we talk a little bit about the financial workings, I guess, because we have a lot of questions about the financial operation of the tribes. Well, I guess with those initial members, when you join, is it true? You hand over all your possessions, all your finances. Is that how it works?
Yes, absolutely. Just like they did in Acts 2. It says that I should read it to you. They're at Pentecost, they're in Jerusalem, whole city's packed full of people, big religious holiday, 11 disciples, because Judas was the betrayer. 11 people get up and start talking and preaching to this vast crowd of people. 3,000 people responded that day, according to the record, in Acts 2 and 4. And, they all... I can't remember, what did you ask?
I asked, did everyone hand over everything? And
and so
yes.
They all responded and to the message, the gospel that Peter primarily was speaking that day, and it says they all left everything, the whole lot of them, just camped out, moved in, came together, became a community, an enlarged family, just house to house, whoever had houses, I don't know, they started organizing themselves. But it says clearly that no one considered anything that they had to be their own. And they shared all things in common with anybody who might have need. Now that's a word for word. I heard that verse 10,000 times. I know it by heart. And it says this in many other ways. And this backs up what the Master himself, Jesus, said. He says, nobody could be my disciple unless he gives up all his own possessions. He said, you have to hate your life. Lose it. Give it up. Abandon it to be my disciple, to follow me. So we were just building on that, you know.
So everyone's handed over everything, but at the same time, you're living in a society where you need money
Correct.
to provide food. You know,
Yeah.
you need to survive.
Yes.
So I guess, is that when the cafes?
Well, that's, yeah, because it's what a normal family does. Somebody goes to work, or maybe both of the parents go to work, maybe more, whatever. But we just had a bigger family, and we had more needs, and so we went to work together. I'd have a crew of 5 guys most of the time, maybe 10, up to 15, and we'd all go to work together.
And what kind of work would you be doing?
I mean, the cafes and the restaurants are a mainstay. They always were. They were part of the beginnings, in the very beginnings, back in Chattanooga and Mentone and Dayton, Tennessee, and these different places. One of the first things he did is he got these young people together. He was giving Bible studies in his house, and he started a little ministry, and he called it the Lighthouse. And people started moving in. They just, they didn't have a place, whatever. His home was open, so they moved in. So now you got 20, 30 kids, and so what are you going to do with these people? So he got an old cafe down in, I can't remember, and the Brainerd Deli in Tennessee and Chattanooga. And they renovated it, got barnwood, pulled barns down, and made it something, and immediately food and a way to meet people, an intermediate place to meet people was established, and cafes became a way of life after that.
Did they also become a way of recruitment?
Yeah, absolutely. That was why. We were able to offer what we called the fruit of the Spirit. It said it right on the back of the menu. It's not a bit corny. But yeah, good quality food in a beautiful environment, and just relax people, and you could get to know them and invite them home, and there's nothing insidious going on in your heart about this.
Obviously, the cafe then is one of the main sources of income for everyone, and because you give yourself over to the community, the logic, I guess, would be that no one earns a wage from working in the cafe. Would I be correct in saying that?
Correct, absolutely correct. There's no wages going on at all. I mean, WorkCover had a devil of a time trying to work with us because we're all bosses. In the end, that's why I worked out. There are no employees because there are no wages.
So how does that work? I guess, you guys are operating in Australia. We have, the ATO operate the way they do. People pay taxes. What happens? Do you guys pay taxes? People aren't getting paid wages, so I guess they don't get paid superannuation.
There's no wages to tax.
Right.
And so, but there is income.
Yeah.
And so this is a good question.
Yeah. Do you know the answer to that question?
Well, I'm the guy who resolved it. Because I kind of had a head for forms and bureaucracy and stuff like that, and things that drive some people crazy. So I did all the immigration work in the beginning and for a while, and then trained somebody else into it. And I also did things like that, like the ATO, applying for tax exempt status. I did it in New Zealand, I did it here.
Is that because the 12 tribes is a religious group? Do you get a tax exemption?
Well, according to the Statute of Elizabeth, which is dated 1601, it defines the 4 heads of charity, and this has passed down into common law in Australia, New Zealand, England, the Commonwealth countries probably, I don't know. And one of, the advancement of education, the relief of poverty, the advancement of religion is one of the 4 heads of charity. So, on that argument,
no tax?
No tax. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit long-winded than that. I went quite into it.
Yeah.
And even covering things like wages in kind, maybe you're just receiving wages. There was a provision in the tax law at the time, which mutates rapidly, that the government would be able to tax you if it was considered wages in kind, and I made an argument that it wasn't. And it was based on our life. Our life was it wasn't even our own. This wasn't a business arrangement. And so, and they sent us a letter saying, okay, you're approved.
Right.
And I mean, of course, the community pays sales tax, as does everyone. They pay rates, as does everyone who owns property. They pay, you know, whatever kind of taxes they have to pay, but they don't make personal income. No one makes a personal income, not UNEG, not no one.
Right.
And so there is no place for income tax to land.
Where does, but there is money being made through sales, and that's fair enough. That's, you know, you guys are selling food to the community, so you know you're entitled to make a profit. What happens to that money though? Does it stay here in Australia? Does it get sent back to America? Does it go into properties? I guess, where does it go? Do you know where it goes?
Well,
once
yeah,
it comes into your hands.
Yeah, I was on the producing rather than the spending side most of the time, although I was put in charge of the books for a month one time when the people in charge were overseas in an event, but that was interesting. Yeah, a lot of it goes just to daily needs. You know, feeding 50 people in the community in Picton. That's when I left. There were 50, 25 adults, 25 children, children being under the age of 16. And so that's a lot of mouths, that's a lot of food, and good food, organic food, nice stuff that costs more, although you're buying it in bulk, so you get a savings there. But still, there's an outgoing. I mean, how much dental work do you think 50 people are going to need? That gets expensive. Shoes, it's all, I was working really hard to keep up with this stuff. We were never flush. There was never a lot of cash lying around to do anything, and we got behind on our bills, which was an aggravation to me. I hated that. When I was left behind for that month, yeah, I think I can say this. I asked the bookkeeper, dear friend of mine, I said, "Where are we at, Kelly? Huh?" And she said, "Well, it's all in the book there, and there's a book of all the accounts and everybody we owe money to." And I said, does anybody ever add it up? And she said, "No, we look at it, we don't add it up." And I said, "Can you add it up?" And it was 50 grand. So we owed 50 grand to people from, you know, years ago to the present moment. And I said, "Okay, how much do we have in the bank right now?" Because we had a pretty flush time. I think we'd come off of a cafe and maybe the Easter show or something. And we used to make a lot of money at the Royal Easter show. And so she got into the bank. She was 50 grand. And I was so tempted, I'll tell you what. Because there's a verse in the Bible that says, "Owe no man anything except a debt of love." And I thought, well, what are we going to do with that? You know, we're so taking it literally, you know, here. Like, I'm having a hard time getting out of this one. But somehow we did. We were happy to be in debt, and that really aggravated me. I did not like it. And they're making more money now. They're a bit more flush down in Picton. They've been quite successful with drinks and green bars and things like that. And so...
Well, I guess it's also trendy to be healthy now. There's
exactly.
a real movement.
Yeah, and they've got a really good product too. And I don't know. So they're not as poor as when I was there.
Well, and they do have some really impressive properties. I mean, Balmoral House is a very impressive
yes.
property. The Peppercorn Creek Farm, I'm sure it didn't probably cost that much to buy back in the day, but you know, it's
well, it was Nathaniel Baker's property. It was Peter's, so we inherited it when Nathaniel joined the community.
Right, okay.
So. Yeah, but they've improved it. It's a beautiful place. I mean, what they've done, I had a good wander around. It's really, really nice. And yeah, they're prospering in a way. They're increasing financially, which is good, fine.
Well, I want to steer this back on track just to your time within there. You said that you struggled with certain things about being a leader, you know, the disciplining and certain things that, you know, you didn't necessarily quite feel like you were leading. Is that fair enough to say that you were told you needed to be a bit tougher?
Yeah.
What would you tell other members about the disciplining of their kids? I guess, you know, you've got to lead by example. What are you telling the people underneath you?
About their children?
About how to treat their children, yeah.
Okay. Well, my reference was to adults because as a shepherd and a leader, you have to. I'm talking about adults, not little children at all here. And so I wasn't assertive enough with the people I was around, you know, say, "Hey, stop this, stop that, this is how we do it." Children is another topic, and it's a big one. And so I'm not sure.
All right, let me ask you a different question.
Okay.
How did you feel about the attitudes within the 12 tribes of the severe disciplining of children?
How did I feel about it?
Yeah.
I thought it was great. At the time, I thought it was fantastic. I
Why?
thought it was,
Why?
my favorite teachings were the child training teachings, which we would have regularly, and yeah, because you could apply them to yourself so clearly, you know, because we're all just a bunch of children anyway, and so, yeah, I just thought they were fantastic, and it was the Word of God, and it's all in the Proverbs. If you want to read it, the blueness of the wound drives away evil. If you hate your child, discipline them while there's hope. You know, don't wait too late. This is what it says in the Word of God. Okay, so I mean, again, it's all in your book. You know.
And you're just reading it, saying, "Well, that's what it says."
Yeah, that's what it
That's
says.
how we need to act.
Yeah, and you can come up with an argument that says, "Hey, children need boundaries. They're insecure without them." And
I don't disagree with that. But the thought of beating a kid as young as 6 months.
Yeah.
I've got a 16-month-old,
Yeah,
and I think if I were to whack her with a rod, I can tell you that she doesn't understand what I'm doing or why.
No, it's more like dog training. You're reducing them down to a more of a primal level. You're not reasoning. Reasoning is actually really frowned upon in the 12 tribes. You're not supposed to do that certainly not with your children. It is, you say do this, they do it. You say don't do it, they don't do it. That's the extent of it. That is the standard. You can say that. So now this is difficult.
Yeah.
But on that thing with children that's what I told the people at we were going to do the Royal Easter Show. No, it was the Olympics. We were going to do the Olympics in 2000, and they were considering us to do it, the SOCOG people. And so they said, "Oh, publicity about you people, and a bit concerned. Can you come and talk to us?" So Israel and Campbell and I went in there, and they were supposed to do the talking. I was just sort of the older guy, just hold their hand. And big meeting, all these people. I've never been in a place like this. And they're organizing the Olympics in Australia, and they want to talk to us. And they say what you just said. It's something like, "Hey, people are they say you're beating your children. And is that true?" And Israel was quiet, and Campbell was quiet, and I thought, "Oh man, gotta respond to this one." And so I said that. I said, we're just kind of old-fashioned. We reckon children just need boundaries, and without boundaries, they're insecure. And it starts pretty young, and they need to know that what you say is what you mean, and what you mean is what you say, and you're good for your word. They need to know that. They're trusting you. They're relying on you to tell them the truth about stuff. And you're their dad, you're their mom, you're their source of life. What are you going to do? Beg out of it? And so, but you say don't do it now. There's consequences, So we have a balloon stick, and everybody knows what that is. And that's literally what they were, balloon sticks. We used to buy them down in Botany, and we'd oil them up so they're quite supple and they last longer and they don't fracture. And it's a whack, whack, whack. It's just enough to get their attention, really. And certainly at 6 months, it's more like that. So to use the word beating, probably not accurate. So I explained this to the people at SOCOG meeting, and one by one they all started agreeing and saying, "Man, that's so good. They really do need that." And it was like this old-fashioned sort of flavor just swept through the room. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. And we got into the Olympics, and we did the equestrian event that year.
And was it the cafe side? Were you selling sandwiches?
Yeah, it's all cafe, big cafe with just hordes of people. You should see the photographs, like 1,000 people trying to serve them lunch at once. It's crazy. I wasn't part of it. I think I was at home. I think I got left home. I was never a cafe person. I have little time for food, really.
So I guess, and I don't want to make the disciplining of the biggest part of our chat, but I am curious.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
As a father of 3 kids, how did you feel about, whacking your kids?
Hey, I tell you, it's easy to think it's a great idea when you don't have any.
Yeah.
It's not hard to do. If you're in the fever of the theology and the teaching, and you're trusting, and it's all there in the Word, and this is going to produce the next generation and the next generation, and then the third one, which is necessary. Your children are absolutely necessary to the fulfillment of this idea. Absolutely. If they don't do it, you're gone. You wasted your time. And so our adherence to the child training teachings was essential and really heavily stressed. And when it didn't happen, things really started to go astray. And so before I had children, this was fine. I loved it. You have your own, and life takes on a different flavor. And smacking your own little human being on the bed there sounds different all of a sudden. And
it was different for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything changes when you have children. It's a real eye-opener. You're in the middle of it.
Yeah. Oh, man, I'm in the thick of it, man. But yeah.
So, and it's not, you know, the trouble is not so much the infliction of a small amount of pain onto a little person, just to let them know they've transgressed a boundary. This is not such a big deal. And it's not even that people get frustrated regularly and take it too far, although that certainly does happen. But it's, the standard is any suggestion of disobedience or hesitancy or reluctance to do your will has to be met with a clear consequence. That's the standard, every single one. And if you take that on board, and now you're a woman, and you're in a kitchen, and it's, you know, very busy. It's a commercial style kitchen, a lot of stainless steel, and a meal's going on for 50 or 80 people, and there's lots of women in there, because the men's, they've got other things to do. And there's children everywhere at your feet, on your side, almost on your shoulders. And because 5 children is, 4 or 5, fairly common. And so, and they have to be with somebody else. There's no daycare. There's no television set. There's nothing to sit them in front of. They're there with you chopping carrots and learning how to chop carrots and doing what you're told. And so you have this environment, and to say that you're going to deal with your children every single time that they don't obey you perfectly, you have no idea what that means.
Oh no, I do. I do.
And I would say sometimes to the brothers in the meeting, I'd say, listen, I think we need to get the women out of the kitchen and take over for a week, you know, and let us do what they do and see what we think after that. You know, because we're making all these decisions that affected their lives. We're so busy over here, so busy over there. And the women, of course, are bearing a lot of the load when the men folk aren't around. So we get on some push, some industry thing, some job, and it's got some deadline. We already had one that had a deadline, and so we're working constantly to do what we said we were going to do, because you have to, and we need the money. And so a lot of the women really wore a lot, and it was expected of them. And this is largely why I'm not there.
Yeah, the disciplining became an issue for you, didn't it?
In many ways, yeah. Many facets to that.
Can you
I have in my own.
expand on that further? Like, can you explain that?
Well, I mean, when your whole, the entire purpose of your life that you've just thrown everything into, and you're going to die for this thing, it is dependent on your children following you and taking on exactly what you've got about the whole business, the whole story, lock, stock, and barrel. They're going to take it on. And the mechanism, one of the primary mechanisms to achieve that is that every act of rebellion is cleansed from them. Every thought of resistance they're clean, they're pure. Like you, and certainly over the generations, we were supposed to produce a third generation of boys, and girls too, but the boys that only get talked about, that were just so pure. There was no lie found in their mouth, no deceit. They weren't defiled by women, it says. This is in the Book of Revelations. And they were going to go out, they called the 144,000. They're going to preach the gospel to the whole world, and then the end will come. So the end of the world depended on our children.
That's a big load to carry.
Yeah. And then and the way to do it is that you meet every act of resistance with consequences. Like, that's just too much, you know? It's too much.
From someone from the outside, and I've never been in there, but to me it sounds like you're beating out their personality, their character, who they are.
You're shaping it in an extreme way. And there's no room for a bit of sideways movement, you know? Fashion and a different way of looking at it, storybooks, no.
And so when did this become an issue for you? When did it start to creep in on your consciousness?
Well, I don't know. I started out with high hopes. You know, I was going to have the greatest children we'd ever produce, but that's kind of arrogant, you know. And I don't know. It wasn't really the children. It was my wife. My wife, she's, as I suggested, she's actually has to wear this. And then she wasn't performing well enough, and she got under fire, and it was, I don't know, a little bit difficult to explain the whole situation, but, and then that reflects back on me, so I'm getting talked to, and you know, you need to keep your wife under control, in a nice way. But, and this is becoming increasingly difficult, and she's more and more unhappy as our children grow up, and she eventually, after not too long, a few years, realizes our children aren't going to do this. They're not going to do it. And they wouldn't either. Like, golly, they're way too free thinking for that kind of stuff. And so at that point, Yonek, the founder of the community, has taught, and you can find this in writing, in his teachings, that if a parent is insufficient in their job as a parent over godly children in the community, and they are unable to, their children fall away. They don't win the hearts of their children. You have to win their heart. And if you don't do that, then you are forfeit. You will not enter the kingdom yourself. You will go to death as a parent of that child. You will. And for us, there was 2 deaths. One was a disciplinary place called hell, which was later on thrown into a lovely place called the lake of fire, which is eternal. Okay, so this is, we actually took this seriously. It's hard to describe.
Well,
you
you would have had to keep doing it, surely.
Yeah. I did it for 30 years. We took it very seriously. We believed it when he said that. That if you lost your child, then your life, your experience of the kingdom of God on the earth for 1,000 years was forfeit. And you were going to be severely cooked for 1,000 years. So, strange ideas, and all in that book. All in there.
How was it, can you explain to me how it was that you came to leave and get out of there? I mean, obviously, it was a long process as you've suggested to me, but can you talk me through the point in which you left the 12 tribes?
Well, to continue on, my wife was unhappy more and more, and not relating to the ladies in the community, and she's just a bit hard to manage. And so, so it became untenable. We had to go, and it was decided that we would go back to the States, and we went to a community in Warsaw, Missouri, which is, we won't describe that. And it was a little bit desolate, and life was a little bit desolate. And she'd already decided in her heart she was going out of there, and she'd already organized and made plans with her sisters down in Oklahoma and some friends in Florida how to do that, and then had an airline ticket organized and a ride out to the airport. And so she took a walk one day with my 2 girls and didn't come back. And my son Elihav was left. He was, what was he, 6? Yeah. And he was with me. And so at that point...
you weren't going to leave at that point, were you?
My wife, her name is Melissa, and at that point Melissa was, she was calling from Florida saying, please come to Florida, please come, it would be a family. And I said, not a chance, you have not got an idea, I'm not going anywhere. I was a rock-solid disciple. I did not shed a tear, I didn't even flinch, nothing.
Even though your wife and your 2 daughters had gone?
Yeah, because I just know God said if they're going to come back, or if my wife doesn't, then my children will, and if my children don't, they'll be preserved or saved, or some kind of justice will happen. So you have to sort of imagine yourself throwing yourself down on an idea that justice is going to happen in the end, and you bank everything on it, the whole lot, because if you don't, it won't. So that's how it works, it needs your involvement to happen. And if you pull back, it won't happen, but it's your fault. So this is it's a weird place to get to. And so, anyway, I don't know, I can't remember all the details, but across the next couple of years, she would come back in and want to be part of the community, but not really. She just wanted to be, she would not let go of us as a family. The idea that we were a family, she was tenacious. She wasn't about to walk off and just have her own life with whatever part of the children she could get a hold of. It wasn't going to work for her. And this is an admirable thing. And so
she was fighting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our integrity as a family. And so I kind of owe it to my wife left. They would say, blame it on the woman because she ate first. I would reverse that, and in my situation. And
so how did you go? Sorry, Han, how did you go from that point of she's gone, I'm not leaving, this is everything, to suddenly being like, I am leaving?
Well, she would come back, and then she was such a troublesome element in a household. Just to have someone who's not part of the community, they were part of the community, they know better, they're a heretic now, they're a fall away person, they've come back, but they're not really wanting to be there. And they're happy looking. They look like they're okay.
Yeah, they don't look like they're going to hell.
This is not a good thing. This is bad for the morale, okay? And so it became to the point where we were better off in a house that the community owned, but there was no community there. And so at that point you have a taste of what living a nuclear family life is like.
A normal life.
And you actually have to go do your own grocery shopping and pay your own bills, and so you're halfway out, just, you know, in that way. So, and I don't know, I started to think, you're right about what my wife was saying, that they're not going to want to do this. And at that point, my next step in my mind as a disciple is, okay, I'm going to let them go. I'm going to let them go. And I wasn't going to do it. I just wouldn't do it. There's no hope I was going to just drop my family somewhere. They gave me a job and we were living in Groton, Massachusetts, up north of Boston. They gave me a job in Boston painting a house, big mansion, and there was $40,000 in it or something. And so I was supposed to do the job, get the money, take my family out to Oklahoma, ensconce them in some kind of accommodation in schools or whatever, and then leave them and come back and be a disciple. Goodbye. And that was completely normal. It's not an unusual expectation. This is just what we said. I said it to other people. I said exactly the same thing in different details. When it came my turn, it was, I'm not going to do it. I can't. This is, but you have to also know that in addition, by this time, this is like 30 years down the track, 20, 28 years down the track, we're not the same. And the young people don't have what we had. And I know they don't have what we had in the beginning. I know it. And tradition is just sort of wrapping its arms around you and institutionalizing and rules and edicts and regulations and which we said we are not good are happening everywhere. You know, one day no more piano. Pianos are gone. We don't play piano anymore. Like, this is really? Anyway, what were you going to say?
So I guess, and we touched on this before we were doing the interview, we were just talking generally, but I guess, are you saying that what you signed up for in those early days in 1979 in Tennessee, the 12 tribes was a very different place when you left? Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, not in every way, but in really the deepest ways, I would say. This is my perspective, and I'm not saying that heart and that fervor, misguided as it is not existent, but it's overlaid by a lot of institutionalization now, a lot of culture. Cults become culture, you know. You know, like the Catholic Church was a cult in the beginning.
Yeah.
So
you would call the 12 tribes a cult?
I think you could use that word. I don't normally. I don't use that word, but not because it's not true, but because it's got too much unclarity. The definition of that word is not clear, and when you start using strong words like that and accusatory words, defamatory words, and without definition, you are in danger of causing confusion, and I don't want to do that. So I don't use that word. Sect is probably better, a little bit less emotional. But definitely high controlling, yeah, all that. But this is my point. Really, is that group does not exist on its like. We're complicit. Everybody there is there because they want to be there. So who's being controlled? Well, so what you end up with is we are creating an environment around us which controls us. We're living in a narrative of high controlness. That's what we want to do. We've made this story up, and then we're going to bring the kingdom, and it's all going to happen. Yahshua's going to come back and save us, and she go to a wedding. Golly, you can really get a picture of the whole story. It's a pageant. They call it a pageant. And so, but we're the ones creating the environment. We've created all this stuff. Just like any kind of religion, any kind of ideology, we create it. Fascism, the socialist, Nazi socialism. These are republicanism, Democrat. All this stuff. These are ideas. And if you want to give yourself to the idea,
so. Can you talk me through the final days of you being in the 12 tribes and the day that you left? Can you recall that?
Well, it wasn't really so metered out. It was more of a process, and like I said, I was given that job to make some money, and I was supposed to use the proceeds to take my family out to Oklahoma, where my wife was born and raised, and get her established, and then I would return to New England, to Boston or wherever, and just be a disciple again. And so I, at that point, had come to the notion that wasn't going to happen. But and this probably happened in this last 6 months before, just gradually, I allowed it in. I allowed the idea in that I could actually discontinue my loyalty to this life and these ideas. I allowed that thought in. And once I let it in, it gained a lot of ground pretty quickly, and it wasn't like I had a big hard time about it, really. My hard time was more, I looked around, I actually got mad for a little while. I remember getting kind of angry, just thinking, but I was really angry at myself probably, nobody was doing anything different or wrong. But yeah, I didn't tell anybody, because if you, as soon as you say, especially if you're under duress like that, and you're being asked to take your family and dump them out in the world somewhere, that as soon as you express doubts or concerns or a difference to what I would call the party line, people will start to recede, and pretty soon support leaves, and you're making your own decisions. You're making your own bed, and you're going to lie in it. And this is the attitude. And if you don't have faith, if you choose not to have faith, then you're disobedient. It's the same as being disobedient. It's not that you're not allowed to not have faith. And so, in monotheism, in its three expressions, you see that consistently. You're not allowed to not have faith. You have to be consistent, or you go down. And so, I knew that I would be trying to deal with this absolutely on my own, and at that point I kind of appreciated being part of the community, because I had a truck, and the boys down there where we were working, they shelved out the whole back of this thing for me, and because everybody just was rooting for me, this is hard, we support you, we're with you, and so different things. I got a lot of support, and then my dear friend Kelly, he came to me. He says, here's an envelope with some cash. He gave me $500 for petrol money to get down to Oklahoma, and I gave him a big hug. And I knew I wasn't going to see him again. And I think he knew it too. And so, but he's such a nice fellow. He's died now. He died in a car crash a few years ago. But anyway, so we went down there and set up shop, and I wasn't going to come back. But it wasn't on a day. There wasn't a day where that sort of happened.
There wasn't a dramatic announcement.
No, there was nothing, because I just sort of left. I just left. And I think a lot of the older brothers might have wondered if that's what I was going to do, but I wasn't about to have an honest conversation with these guys at that point. I wasn't going to do it, because any more than you could, in a way, the sides are drawn so severely. If you're not in, you're out. If you're not with me, you're against me. That's what he said. So, and he said other things too that contradict that, but that's the position I would take.
Which is interesting though, because you say if you're not in, you're out, and you are out.
Yeah.
But you are allowed back in.
Yeah, because there's hope that I would repent. I would see the error of my ways, like the prodigal son, and have suffered enough in the world and being separated from the life and the light of God, that I would want to come back, want to come home, be a son again. I've turned my back on my father, and I've been, wasteful.
Yeah. Obviously, the child discipline thing is something we've focused on with the last story and we've been curious about. But the other part of our last story, which I know you saw, which I'm curious about, is the seeking of medical treatment or the lack of seeking medical treatment when you're within the community.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through what happens if I'm a member in the community and I'm very ill?
Depends what kind of very ill you are.
At what point are you allowed to seek medical treatment?
Yeah, I know. A lot of mistrust of the medical system, part of the world, the whole scientific approach to it, the lack of faith, really. Science is not such a bad thing, but I'm speaking for them as far as I understand what I understood. I think this would be fairly accurate. They're not anti-scientific. They have heaps of computers, mobile phones, all that stuff. They're not technophobic, but the lack of faith. And so in all things, the Word of God takes precedence. The Bible takes precedence. And so, this thing was written 2,000 years ago based on superstitions and ideas that predate that by another 1,500 years. So they didn't have anesthesia. They didn't have hospitals. And so if someone's sick, call for the elders. Pray first, then you call for the elders. This is the advice in the Bible. Now, okay, that's fair enough.
Because at that time there was no anesthetic and there
Exactly.
was no modern day medicine.
And so it's a different day, but we had a strong mistrust of the world generally, that inside-outside thing, because if you want to have a strong identity, create a strong enemy, and then you really know who you are. And this works on an individual level, it works on a collective level. And you see it with nations, just nations with statism, all this crap. It's just, we need an identity, I needed an identity. I didn't even know who I was. I was 23 and I was desperately wondering, who the heck am I? And I found it in a big way, like really big way. A deep, deep, strong identity, an eternal identity, the best kind you could get, a son to a father, the creator of all. Like this, what an identity.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I can't remember where we're headed.
Medicine.
Medicine.
Is for some reason, let me just change it again.
All right.
And before we go on, it's batteries are dead.
All right.
Thank you. My mistake.
Yeah, medicine.
Yes.
The whole, and I understand that, religion on one side, science on the other, and
Yeah.
the two, they don't sit well necessarily with each other, particularly when the religion comes from a manuscript from 2,000 years ago when science wasn't the way science is now. So I understand what you're getting at here.
Well, monotheism has been bucking the scientific method for, since it started, since the Renaissance, since Galileo and Newton, and the Catholic Church resisted the idea of zero for a long, long time. Now, why is that? Zero, nothingness, a void. They couldn't hack it. They couldn't imagine such a thing because we have to go on forever. You can't. The whole thing is based on you going on forever, either in one place or the other. But you're there.
Yeah,
There
it
can't
still
be a
exists.
zero.
Yeah.
So mathematics suffer greatly because it's such superstitious nonsense, And there's a zillion instances of this.
Close to Ali's face, please. No, I want us to go back to that one.
Yeah.
Okay, stand by.
The clapper.
The clapper. It's like they bring me.
Ali's face, stand by. And where you go, Clapper?
Yeah, this is Master Interview Han 4.
Right.
Sorry about that, guys.
It's all right.
Okay, yeah.
We'll go back to medicine.
Medicine, yes.
Yeah, that's one thing that's really stuck with me since the last story. So, if you said that an elder would come to look after
Yeah.
someone who was ill, you were an elder.
Yeah.
So when people were ill,
Yeah.
what was your role?
As an elder and a shepherd, you would go and you would find out if there was anything in them that they needed to get out.
Like what?
And you could call it confessing your sins, although we didn't get into that kind of terminology so much. But just, you'd been watching pornography, you had, and you'd been mean to your wife, or you'd been insubordinate to your husband, you'd hit your children too hard.
And that would be causing the illness, would be the logic.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. We would definitely associate stuff like that. But not out of hand, not assuming that. You just find out if people are just trouble, stress, they need to talk, get something out. And you give people freedom to do it. This, to me, it wasn't the Catholic Church's sort of idea of the confessional. I spent, I don't know, countless hours talking to people like that. And I don't know, I loved it. I loved talking to people about giving them a platform to communicate. But anyway,
But if someone's seriously ill,
if they're ill, yes, then we would carry on. And if there wasn't any issues spiritually, then we would pray for them. And I mean, again, like appendicitis is different than having a bad case of the flu. You know, some things are fairly more urgent. We didn't say you couldn't go to the hospital, but it had to get to a point of urgency where there's some danger. I know of a girl who almost died, and by the time they got her there and they got her a blood transfusion, she was nearly gone. And so, and I can introduce you to her, you know. This is not, I'm not making this up. And so, there's cases like that, you know.
but who gets, so does an elder get to make that call?
Elders, you're going to, when it gets sort of critical, like in a birth, which is a critical situation on a good day, then there's all, the elders are all there, and the midwives are there, and it's a very serious matter, and you are clean in your insides because it's life and death, and you know it, and people are praying, and it's a serious thing.
As someone who had a pretty rocky birth myself with my daughter, I know that things can go from 0 to 100 really quickly in those situations.
Yeah, there's not a lot of time.
And I know that you saw, you know, things can go that quickly. So I guess, you know, what happens when things go to 0 to 100, particularly when, say, a woman is giving birth to a baby? You know, you talk about having midwives there.
Well, the only births I actually were present at, I was outside the door at many, but I was present at my own 3. And I was outside the door because we would always have a gopher guy with a vehicle that's fully petroled up and the keys in his hand, and he knew where the hospital was.
Right.
And this was standard procedure in some of the communities. I don't know, I can't say that's universal, but certainly, that's how we did it. And so, you know, there was a point where you don't want somebody to die giving birth and you don't know what to do. Of course you're going to take them to the hospital. We weren't lacking sense to that degree.
Right.
But it had to get pretty desperate. Like my eldest girl, was breech. And at the time, the main midwife down in Picton is living there. She was not confident to do that, to handle a breech birth. And she was a very experienced girl and woman, and a dear friend of mine, and not confident. And so we had a connection with a midwife in the worldly midwife, very nice lady, and she had a connection with the guy who ran the pediatrics, the birthing thing in what's that hospital in Alexandria? I can't remember, Queen Elizabeth or something.
Prince of Wales?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
He was in charge of the whole department, and he had a technique whereby he could manipulate and spin a child in the womb who was breech. And so we went down there, and we took our midwife friend and our midwife and me and my wife Melissa, and we went to see this guy, and it was very intense.
Yeah, it's not a nice process.
No, they had the ultrasound going, so the heartbeat, and you got the fetal heart tones in your ears, you know, and they said, "Do you want to see?" And I said, "No, I don't want to see." Thank you anyway. And so he's trying, and my girl wouldn't go around. She just wouldn't go. And then so he gave up. And then after a few minutes, he tried again, and she just went, whoop, spun around. But it turns out, you could see on the screen that the cord was now down below the head, and so there was a danger that my child was going to die of asphyxiation as it was being born. So the doctor looked at that, and he said, "Okay, we're downstairs we go. We need to do a cesarean." And I said, "Well, what if we don't do that?" And he said, "You'll have a dead baby." And I said, "Oh, let me think about that a minute." And I make this sound kind of calm, but it wasn't really. It's pretty intense. And so I looked at the midwives, I looked at, and I don't know, I can't remember what we said, I didn't say much. And the doctor came back and I said, Doctor, the child that's in my wife's womb was put there by our Creator, and He chose to put that life there, and if it's going to be born alive, it'll be because He makes it born alive, and He's going to bring it to birth. And I really appreciate your help here, and your wisdom and your expertise, but you know, we'll take it from here. We're going to go home now.
That's a big call.
Yeah, I know. I know. This is where faith takes you. This places like that. And so, and I don't know. It's hard for me to relate to the person who said that today. It's difficult, you know. But I wouldn't suggest that I would say the same again. But that's what I said that day. And the doctor immediately just sort of stood back and he said, "Oh, that's fine," and he just completely respected our position, and because I was very serious about it, and so I said, "What do I owe you?" He said, "Nothing," and he sent us home. And we did some exercises, rolling on balls and things. The midwives kicked in and they had some ideas, and at the end of the day, she was born fine. So what do you get out of that? I don't know. That's a medical experience that I had with birth, you know. There were babies that were stillborn. There were babies that struggled to live. Definitely, the whole gamut, you know. You can imagine outside of a hospital. I'm married, not quite yet. We're about to get married here soon, to a nurse, a theater nurse, you know. I get her perspective, and I mean, she thinks. Anyway. Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. No, I can't say there was a lot of that. Those things did happen, and some of those things probably would have been preventable. But see, I wasn't personally involved in a child who was stillborn, as one of the elders overseeing that situation.
As
that never happened to me.
At a birth.
Yeah, but it did happen in the community, like it happened with Rose. That's very true. Her story of losing that child.
And I guess from doing that story with Rose and you know, going through childbirth myself, I guess there's that sense where if your baby stopped moving and you go to hospital quick enough, they can do things.
Yeah.
That they will cut her open, emergency C-section straight away. And I don't get where she's coming from. That, you know, had she sought medical treatment, her child could be here today. So what do you think about that? Now that you have this new perspective, you're about to marry a nurse. You say that with your situation, you may not have said no to the cesarean with your former wife. You may have said, actually, with what you know now, go for it. So how do you feel, I guess, looking back at the way that the 12 Tribes community, their attitude towards going to hospital with births? Like, how do you feel about their attitude now with the perspective that you have now?
Well, I guess that's why I'm talking to you, because I think it, you know, I mean, whether you agree it's a good idea or not a good idea, or you want to have faith about things, they're not the only people that think these kind of ideas, you know. There's a fair resistance to the medical establishment. They are a bunch of criminals, the pharmaceutical side anyway. But the medical system does amazing, beautiful things and saves people all the time, every day, helps people out, you know. And so, whether you think it's a good idea or not to trust God with such things and how far to take it, that's, I don't know, that's up to every individual person. I'm not going to issue some kind of blanket opinion about it,
but how do you feel about it?
But personally, I'd be off to the hospital. And yeah, Rose would have been off to the hospital, and as a few people should have gone to the hospital a lot earlier. Yeah. That reluctance is dangerous. It takes you too close to the line. But that's how we did it. We were all in. We actually were believing that He was going to come through. And when He didn't come through, then generally it's your fault. And so there's a ready answer. But this is monotheism. It's always your fault. It's from the get-go.
I know that you said you weren't present at any of the births other than your own children, so you may or may not be able to answer this. But with the babies that were stillborn, do you know if they were ever recorded obviously you need to record the birth of a baby. Do you know if their presence was ever recorded? Or
some were, some were. and probably some weren't. I don't know. I didn't chase all that stuff up too much.
Do you know where the babies were buried? Were they buried on a property? Were they buried at Peppercorn Creek Farm? Do you know what they did?
I know, yeah, one child, yeah, there was one stillborn that was buried on the farm. I'm not going to give you a name on this one, okay?
Sure.
But this, I do know that, and there would probably be more, and that's, I mean, where else would you, you know? And it's a tragic event, but it's not something you're going to rush off and tell anybody about. And so, you know, people know. I mean, you know, like maybe anyway.
I just know in Rose's situation, she had said to me that, you know, the baby, it was her fault, you know,
Yes.
her sins that,
Yeah.
and then the baby was taken away and she didn't know where the baby went. And so my question would then be, you know, as an elder, did you know where the babies were taken?
No, I don't know that one particularly. Yeah, I know that one child was buried on the farm, and I think one child went down to another property. I don't know where though. I wasn't in the loop on some of this stuff. When it gets to this sort of drama, you go to the person in charge. They're in charge of the community, and they make decisions at that point. And it's like there's not even a lot of consultation.
Would that be Noon?
Yeah.
Oh, let's not talk about dead babies because it's just incredibly sad. Can we? I just want to kind of finish off by asking you some of your perspectives now that you're out and you've had quite a few years to digest everything that happened to you. What I guess you must have some thoughts on this. Looking back on the 12 tribes, what do you think about your time there? How do you view your time there? What lessons, I guess, have you learnt from that experience?
Well,
and I'm sure you would have thought about this knowing that we were coming here these last few days.
I mean, how long have you got here? I don't know. I mean, I obviously had to do it, so that's why I did it, and I'm not doing it now because I couldn't possibly do it now, and I value every minute of it, and it's just, I couldn't be here where I am. This is just a physical fact. I couldn't be here without going through all that stuff, living that life like that. It was, for me, I don't know, I think there would be a lot of people who could relate to this, I think, like people in the military, say under fire, comrades under fire, you know, you develop a camaraderie, a connection that would be very intense and possibly a little bit hard for many people to even understand. And they come back and they're just adrift now, they're just a civilian, they're nothing, you know, but they were part of this effort, you know, and if you had some patriotism in the mix there, boy, this could be a powerful thing, you know, and now you're just nothing, and so, okay.
Well, I could pose a different question if it helps, I guess. Why have you decided to go on the record and talk to us about it? What's led you to this decision?
Well, yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, I've been wanting to publish something in some format, some way, shape, or form for quite a while. And it just starts with talking to yourself, which I learned how to do when there was nobody else to talk to, and knowing and just dropping the idea that God was listening, because that never really worked very well for me anyway. And so you end up talking to yourself, which is the greatest thing you can possibly do in my mind, is ask yourself, well, what do I think about that? And then you go from there to realizing that your thoughts are actually not even who you are. The person asking the question is deeper than you even imagined. And so you start getting answers, and what was your question? I can't remember.
Why did you decide to talk to us? Why have you come to this point where you wanted to put some of these things on the record?
Well, and so in the process of organizing all this, I realized that all we were doing was trying to live what it says in that book. And this got me thinking about that book and everything that it represents. And there's three facets to it: Judaism and Christianity and Islam. And I look around the planet and I see incredible stuff that is happening atrocious, horrible things happening left and right that have an intrinsic association with those three branches of monotheism. And I'm not going to go into long details about this, but you know, the Islamic world is the fundamentalist aspect of the Islamic world is a worry. And if you're not worried, then I think you're not looking. And this is my opinion only. And I mean, all you'd have to do is read the Quran, which is based on the Bible. Totally. I've got 2 copies of it here, and you're welcome to have a look. Actually got it out, and I've got some quotes from it if you want to hear them. Because the thing with the Bible and monotheism is that it is based on world domination. If it needs to win in the end. There is an end, there is an apocalypse, and they need to win. And you see this in the people who support Donald Trump, the Republican right, conservatives, religious people, the evangelicals in America. I mean, it's a powerful thing. This is not, what I was doing is a small thing, a few thousand people, you know, in some little farm in Picton. It means nothing, really. It's significant. When 35% of the American population think that those ideas are really good, that the Bible needs to be elevated to a position of respect and obedience, then I'm worried about that. When I look around the world and I see what's happening, Islam, you know, the fundamentalist idea behind this, and I'm not into being, I'm certainly not into being politically correct, but I'm not bagging out Muslims or Islam or Christians or anybody, but I know that the fundamental theology underneath it is world domination. That is there. You can't take it out of there. And there's a lot of nice people who believe all this stuff. They don't even know what they believe, and they're just nice people. But then there's some who aren't so nice, and we weren't nice. We were ferocious. We wanted to see the end of the planet and everybody on it destroyed, just like in the ark when Noah and his 8 survived. We wanted to see that happen. Not, you know, we were just wanted, because we wanted the earth to be clean, and we took it very seriously. And so everybody who's not on our side needs to go away. And this is a really ferocious sort of a position to take. Like, you are not allowed to be different. You are not. In the monotheistic narrative, no one is allowed to be different in the end. For a while, we'll put up with you, but in the end, you've got to go. And it's not good where you're going. And it might not be good how you get there. And this is a really diabolically, I think it needs to disappear. I think we need to grow out of it. And to tell you the truth, this is really what I wanted to say. I don't know if this ever get to air, because it's, you know, a bit inflammatory or something maybe for some people, but this is really what I've got. My greatest lesson in life is, you know, I mean, one of them, if I could distill it down, is that the Bible is a really serious document, and we need to take it seriously, and not in the way we have been.
So not in a all, this is a wonderful thing? No, because, you know, all we were trying to do was do what it said, and we were trying to love one another. And I can read you 17 verses about how that's described. Just lay down your life for one another every day. That's what it means to love one another. We had such good intentions, and we wanted that to totally fill the earth and then the universe. We were going to populate the universe. I was going to get whole galaxies or something. And I mean, these are good things, you know. Who could argue with such an idea that love should fill the universe? Who wouldn't want their own galaxy?
Yeah, well, that too. But just that love would fill the universe. It would fill our hearts first and spread out into a family, and then fill the earth and fill the universe. Now, to me, I can't fault that concept. But in the course of doing that, everybody else gets wiped out. So, so we were leaving all our dirty work to God. He was going to execute everybody, and then we could just go on and enjoy the garden again. I have a problem with that narrative now. And I bought into it because, A, it was in my culture. I grew up in Wisconsin, in a little place outside of Milwaukee, and a farming community, cows and barns everywhere, and Christianity was just the staple spirituality, and there was 3 of them, 3 different brands, and there's no alternative, or, you know, everybody else was weird. And so I grew up with it, but And then I got really desperate. I was afraid of death. I got to be 16. I'm thinking, my English teacher says when you're born, as soon as you're born, you start to die. And I really hated that he said that. And I had to do something with it, and there's no answers. I go to the East and that I'm not getting it, no one's taking my anxiety away. And the world's an anxious place, anxiety predominates our culture in so many ways, and suicide is very popular. It's just too much. The load becomes unbearable for people. They have to opt out. And pills and pills and pills, and diagnoses, and thank God I got my diagnoses now. Now I know who I am. I got PTSD or this or that, and I'm not bagging out the labels, but they're only labels. The condition is deeper. If you're going to treat something on a superficial level, you're going to get a superficial response. I wanted a deep response, like what is going on here, and why am I afraid? And that life totally provided it. Absolutely, it was magical to immerse myself into a purpose and a reason, and the reason was love, and we were going to take over everything. It was going to sweep away everything. Our love was going to win everything for God. It could all come home again, and we could all be His children. I mean, this is, I don't know, it's like, why not? What else would you want to do with your life? So, but to me the premise is toxic. To say what Christianity says, what the Bible says, rather, what it says is that you're born in sin, and I don't know, the game is rigged from the get-go, there's no... Okay, the premise is God is perfect and you're not. Okay, now what are you going to do about that? Well, okay, God says that because you're not perfect, you're rubbish. You can get thrown in the rubbish. I mean, right away you should start questioning this, right? As I said, but we don't. We said, okay, this is what the Bible says. You're rubbish, and you're a sinner, you're unclean, you're corrupt, you need to be forgiven. You're dirty, you need to be forgiven, you need to be clean. The only one way to do that is that someone comes and sacrifices his life for you, who was clean. At least it's a propitiatory, substitutionary sacrifice. And so then based on that, you can be clean if you surrender your life to God. So this is the storyline. It's in every tract, every book. It's on not everywhere. Gideon's Bibles. But I disagree. I say, I don't care that I'm not perfect. I'm not the totality. I'm not the wholeness of all things. I'm just me. I don't need to be perfect. So right away, go away. Just go away. I don't need this, but it works. That line works on most people. It works. I used to use it on people. I know it affects them. And so you've done things wrong, haven't you? And they think about it, maybe they can come up with a few, maybe you've got their confidence, we're talking, you say something. You have guilt about that, don't you? I mean, it's not so scripted as this, but guilt, I can say, you have things you probably feel guilty about, and you go, yeah, I probably do.
Because I'm human.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Because you're human. But human isn't enough. If you want to be in God's company, you've got to be like God. You've got to be perfect. Now, you see the presumption that just happened there?
Yeah.
I don't agree. I don't agree. That's why I'm talking about this. Because I finally got it that, no, I don't have to be perfect.
It's been quite a journey for you to get to this point.
Yeah.
But look, this has been very enlightening. I'm very thankful that you've given us your time and invited us on to chat to you. And thank you.
You're very welcome. I appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
I don't get this opportunity too often.
Yeah. You've given us a lot to think about, I think.
So, there you go. So while I got your attention, I got more things to say. One thing for sure, I wanted to make a couple corrections about that interview. Small things really, but I don't really have a lot of respect for Yunek, particularly since the Hayemic thing, and his way of handling that, so inconsistent with his way of handling much smaller situations of the same nature. I don't find that very honorable, especially from someone who is a teacher and says in the book of James somewhere that be careful as far as being a teacher because you're worthy of a double judgment, and that just all happens inside yourself. So he must be going through a lot of hell inside his own psyche, really, and trying to rationalize this stuff enough to drive a man crazy. But anyway, I have a type of respect for Yannick because I think he was genuine, whatever that means. That's like sincere, you're left wondering what it means. But he, I wasn't following him because he was a madman. He made sense out of the book and had an applied life that you could actually do it. It's just when you start adding all these things, arbitrary stuff, man-made stuff, then love is suffocated. But the love, I can't deny. I just have to say that I was in the 12 tribes because I had never and have never since seen such a thing, a phenomenon like that. And I want to treat it like a phenomenon. I don't want to treat it like a cult, although you could say that it is for sure. And there are many examples of that. And you could work for Microsoft and be considered part of a cult. But this one is obviously highly controlling, but to me, so much of the journalism that's been applied to the 12 tribes and I guess other groups like them it's very much a victim-perpetrator scenario, and because those things happen. No one's making it up. But to see it only from that perspective, to examine it only from that point of view, it seems very limiting, and you're going to gain a certain amount of understanding, I guess. If your goal is justice, it's unlikely, not even possible, really, because you're creating a conflict situation. You need an enemy at this point to accuse and defend, and this thing is self-perpetuating. There's no understanding going on here. It's like Republicans and Democrats. Nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants to hear what the other side's saying. They're all right already, just because they're blue or red or pink or green, whatever color you want to be. It's just not. I don't see it as a productive way to approach even a problem. And I don't even believe in problems anymore. I think there's challenges, and as soon as you make it a problem, you're personalizing it. So for me, my personal experience in the 12 tribes contradicts that narrative, that whole victim-perpetrator relationship. And so it's really hard for me to understand it from that point of view. I mean, I can get it, but it just is a lot more scope, I think. And I'd like to explore that, I'd like to talk about it. And I'm looking forward to reading Kevin's book and also to listening to Kate's interview, which I haven't had a chance to do yet. And anybody else, that, because I don't essentially see the community as a big menace to society, I see them as a, I don't know, how do I see them? I mean, people go in there, I said this thing in the interview that everybody's there because they want to be there, and that's not true either. That's another correction I want to make. But largely it is. For the adults that choose to get baptized as adults, they walk in, you meet them at wherever, and you bring them home, and there they are at the bus at a festival. I don't know. To me, you're doing something because you want to do it. There's something in you. It's like a con game. There is no con game that works without someone who's greedy, right? And so you've got to have a motive. And so the con man works with that motive and achieves his ends. So to me, monotheism is a protection racket more than a con game. It's like someone, I heard it described, they come up and cut you and then they offer to sell you a Band-Aid, they got a bit more to work with than that, but it's definitely, like God walks into your shop and says, "Well, nice shop you got here. Hate to see it get wrecked, and just for the small cost of da-da-da, will keep you safe, and somehow we go for this. So this, to me, this is the phenomenon I'm interested in. The 12 tribes is a symptom. It is a symptom, you know, and it displays nasty things. It also displays many beautiful, amazing things. So that's why I told that lady Allison at the current affair, that I wanted to do a balanced conversation. And actually, they haven't done anything with it, and I haven't heard back from her in weeks. And she reckoned it'll only be a couple of weeks originally, but that was a long time ago. And I sent her an email and I said, hey, what's up? You know, I want to post my copy of what we did, and because I was waiting on them, they asked me to wait, and so I haven't heard back from her, so I might just go ahead and do it anyway. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to have a balanced conversation, because I don't learn much, you know, from being right, and I don't think anybody does. And we're also just caught up in this thing about being right. Everybody wants to be right. Man, it drives me up a wall, really. Because we get nowhere. I came out of the community, I listened to the news again, and I thought, wow, is this the news? This is what they're trying to tell me. And then I listened to, in Australia here, you get to listen to parliamentary session. You get to listen to the legislators in the Congress, the federal level, talking and arguing and their points. And they're just like a bunch of children. They're all not listening to one another. No one's listening. They got a lot to say, and most of it's just like double speak, you know, Orwellian sort of stuff. It doesn't mean what it actually sounds like. And anyway, I was really appalled, and so anyway, regarding that comment about everyone who's there is there because they want to be there, that applies to the adults who made the decision. It completely leaves out anybody who was born there, and yeah, what happens after that is anybody's guess. So I just want to yeah, correct that, because that wasn't quite right. Anyway, I was one of those people who joined as an adult, you know, and I realized thinking about it that what I was doing, not consciously until much later aware of it, but I was making a transaction. I was trading in my fear of uncertainty, my fear of change. I didn't like that everything changes, and the ultimate change, of course, is death, and it's the one we get kind of freaked out about. And so, but change, we don't like it. We like patterns and solidity and predictability. We love science, you know, look what it's done for us. And so, but change, we're a bit, you know, a bit concerned about that. So we get quite anxious, really, you know, and as a people, as a species. So I came across this opportunity to lose all of my fear of change, all my anxiety about the future, and all my guilt for the past, all the stuff I was carting around. And I knew there was stuff I was carting around. I was mostly not willing to look at it, this was the offer. For me, it wasn't a thing of forgiveness. I never connected on that level, really. I pretended on 10,000 breaking of breads, you know, really, you know, you try to get into the mood and into the emotion and into the idea of the thing, and sometimes you're a bit more successful than others, but I never really connected with the thing of needing to be forgiven. And my opinion about guilt now is just it's a cognitive dissonance. I'm within myself. I'm not in agreement with myself. I have an uncomfortable feeling with myself. And so, because, you know, Unick said it, the only good judgment is self-judgment, and I totally agree with that. And I always did. But so, you know, we had this tremendous need for all this external authority. Interesting how that works, isn't it? How do you follow God with all of your own internal heart when everything's outside? So anyway, yeah, I made a transaction. I traded in my unease and my anxiety and my fear of death for the assurance, you know, the assurance that everything is going to go good. And to be deeply connected to a spirit, even when I couldn't see or touch or audibly hear, I had to do a lot of imagining it. But to be connected like that and to follow God with all of your heart into a life of loving people in complete servitude, complete unselfishness, just selfless life. You've left your ego. I wouldn't have called it that. We called it the flesh. But you've set free. You're liberated from the flesh. I mean, I couldn't think of a more beautiful experience than that, to walk in the garden again with God, holding his hand, and he's a big old God. He's walking beside you, and he's got your hand, and you're just a little boy or girl. I mean, to me, this was the pinnacle of human experience, to be reconnected back to God like that, and the result would surely be love. So things added up to me, you know. They when I made that transaction, I thought it was a good deal. And I went to Bill Signorelli and I said, man, what should I do with this Social Security card and driver's license and bank card and whatever I had in there? I wanted to rip them up. I had no faith in what human beings were up to. And so, yeah, I made the transaction, and we called it a covenant, of course, and it was all based on our guilt. I was not in that space really ever. I had a hard time confessing my sins. I just didn't feel bad enough, you know, and trying to talk to God, you know, trying to go out and have a conversation. Noon said at one time, he said he was out walking and praying, and he was out in the woods, and he started talking to God, and then he realized it dawned on him really deeply, and that he was talking to himself, and that was his way of communicating with God. And he shared that with us in Auckland years and years ago, and it never left me. I thought, yeah, huh. And so this is really what it's about, you know, finding out, going inside yourself and asking yourself questions, and yeah, and I don't know. I've learned a lot from a guy named Eckhart Tolle. He's written a couple of books, a few more things, and been popularized. And but yeah, it's really helped me a lot. Really brought me a lot of clarity. All the things that we used to talk about, couched in the story of the Bible, you know, all that stuff. God's chosen people in Israel, and on and on and on, all the way to the Book of Revelation. Doesn't need all that storyline. It's all those things are true. They're true. But one thing I find really interesting is that in the Bible, in the biblical narrative, that it's a timeline, and you got a past, and you got a present, you got a future, and we're all looking forward to the future. And salvation is always in the future. We tried to make it present by saying we're experiencing salvation today, but the ultimate goal and the reward and the end game, the thing you're looking for, the last chapter, as Hasaba Hagav said, we read the back of the book, and we win. And so this is the thing you're looking for, your incentive. And it's the big payout at the end. And the thing I realized is that the future is a construction of the mind. And in the mind it exists as a thought form in your mind, and others, and you can share them, and you can have calendars and clocks. And it's a pretty functional idea. Really, you can plan for stuff and get things done. But it's still in the mind, because obviously when it arrives, it's the present. And somehow the future never arrives as the future. And the past is the same, you know, because when you experienced it, it was the present moment. And so it's a real simple deduction to work out, that there is only one time you can actually be alive, and that's in the moment that we call now. And that's it. Everything else is an idea in your head, and ideas can be powerful stuff, and really good, really bad, whatever, but they're just ideas. And the thing about an idea is it's subject to change, you know. You can change your ideas, you can do what you want with them. So the future is malleable, and it's actually, we could very well be making up most of this stuff, our life experience, and what happens to us could be very much decided by how we think. And but this helps me, you know, to know that this is Tolle's theme song is now is what you've got, and anything else, living somewhere else, living in your thoughts and in your mind, and which is almost always somewhere else, not here, not now, is makes you neurotic. It makes you crazy to lose connection with reality, which is now, and what is going on, and surrendering to what is already happening now. That's the beauty of showing up for it, is that you catch up with what is already going on, and you're not worried about how this might work out or happen or what might transpire, and you're not dragging around what happened in the past. And so it's very, very liberating in such a simple, sublime, subtle sort of way. So yeah, I just want to plug Eckhart Tolle. Of all the people I've listened to in the last 10 years, and it's a lot of people, he is my clearest voice, the one that speaks clearest to me. Yeah, because I reckon he's actually speaking from a place of an experience. He is not talking conceptually. He's not giving you mental ideas and thoughts and concepts. He's actually there, what we would call enlightened, I guess. Yeah, so that he's got that. So that obviously gives you authority, speaking from the place of experience. That's what we said in the 12 tribes. You have no authority if you're not living the life, and that is also true. And so, yeah. So, and he talks a lot about ego too. Jesse Kirby, he sent me a message in response to something I had posted, probably a quote by Tolle, and he said, "What is the ego?" And I haven't responded. I think I sent something back, but I'll yeah. There's a lot to be said here about that one. But anyway, I would suggest you get Eckhart's books. They're called The Power of Now and A New Earth, and they're really worth having, worth reading. I mean, I enjoy a lot of people, but so that's about it. That's enough of your time. I'm gonna get off this thing. And we started our podcast, Sean and I. We did our first segment, which, you know, is going to end up on the cutting room floor, I think. But it's still, we're off the ground. We got going, and we're keen to just sit around a table and start jabbering, and then include people and whatever, you know. People have, I don't know how to do it. I don't know the technology, but we'll get there. So I'll keep up with you, and we'll talk soon. Bye.